Princess Lirale stood in the grand throne room of the Valthara Empire, watching the council members whisper among themselves like children sharing secrets. Her silver hair caught the light from the crystal chandeliers above, and her purple eyes burned with anger that she tried hard to hide. The 12 council members sat on their floating thrones wearing masks made of precious metals that hid their faces, but could not hide their cruel intentions. The High Counselor Valdris raised his golden mask slightly and spoke in a voice that dripped with false sweetness. "Princess Lirale, you have been chosen for a great honor. You will travel to the human colony called New Eden as our diplomatic representative." Lirale felt her dragon companion, Shadowmere, stir restlessly in the courtyard outside. The massive creature could sense her emotions through their mental bond, and the dragon did not like what she was feeling. The council called this an honor, but Lirale knew better. She had questioned their policies too many times and spoken too often about making peace with other species. Now they wanted to get rid of her. "The humans are a young species," Counselor Thane added from behind his silver mask. "They barely learned to travel between stars. 50 years ago they are primitive and weak. We send you there as a gift to show our superiority." The other council members laughed softly at this. The sound made Lirale sick to her stomach. She knew what they were really doing. This was not diplomacy. This was an insult meant to hurt both her and the humans. The council thought they were sending away a troublesome princess to live among barbarians. They thought this would teach her a lesson about the superiority of the Valthara way. But Lirale had studied the humans in secret. She had read their history and learned about their wars and their courage. What she found amazed her. These humans did not just fight to survive. They fought to protect each other. They died for strangers and saved enemies. They created beauty in the middle of destruction. They built hope where others saw only darkness. "You will leave tomorrow," Valdris announced. "The ship is already prepared. Your dragon may accompany you if you wish, though I doubt the humans will appreciate such a magnificent creature in their crude colony." Lirale bowed her head respectfully, but inside her heart was racing. Tomorrow she would leave everything she had ever known, her home, her family, her world. She would travel to a place the council considered a punishment, but that she thought might be the beginning of something wonderful. That night Lirale walked through the crystal gardens to the dragon roost where Shadowmere waited. The dragon was enormous, even for her kind. Her scales shifted color from deep purple to black, depending on the light, and her golden eyes held intelligence that rivaled any Valthara noble. Shadowmere had been with Lirale since she was a child, and their bond was stronger than blood. The dragon lowered her great head when Lirale approached and spoke directly into her mind as dragons did. "We go to the humans tomorrow, my friend." Shadowmere rumbled deep in her throat, a sound like distant thunder. "I feel your excitement, princess. These humans interest you greatly." "They do," Lirale admitted, running her hand along the smooth scales of Shadowmere neck. "The council thinks they are sending me to live among primitives, but I think they are sending me to learn from teachers." The dragon eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Then we shall learn together what the council means as punishment. We shall turn into opportunity." Lirale spent the rest of the night packing her belongings. She took very little, just some clothes, her ceremonial weapons, and a few books about human culture that she had hidden from the council. She also packed medical supplies and healing crystals, thinking the humans might need them more than she did. As dawn broke over the crystal spires of the capital city, Lirale made her way to the spaceport. Shadowmere flew overhead, casting a massive shadow on the streets below. Few people came to see her off, which did not surprise her. The council had made sure everyone knew this was a punishment, not an honor. The ship waiting for her was beautiful in the way all Valthara vessels were. It looked like it had been grown rather than built, with curves that flowed like water and a hull that shimmered with embedded crystals. The captain was a young officer named Kelris, who looked nervous about transporting a princess, even one being sent away in disgrace. "Your Highness," he said, bowing deeply, "your quarters are prepared and we have made space in the cargo hold for your dragon." Lirale nodded politely. "Thank you, Captain." Kelris How long will the journey take? 3 weeks. Your Highness, assuming we encounter no delays. 3 weeks to say goodbye to everything she had ever known. 3 weeks to prepare for a new life among aliens that her people considered beneath them. 3 weeks to study and learn and plan for whatever came next as the ship lifted off from the spaceport. Lyrelei stood at the observation window watching her world grow smaller below. The crystal cities gleamed like jewels in the morning sun, and she wondered if she would ever see them again. The council clearly hoped she would not. They wanted her gone forever, buried on some distant human world where her dangerous ideas about cooperation and peace could not infect other Velthara. But, as the ship entered hyperspace and the stars became long streaks of light, Lyrelei felt something she had not expected. She felt free. For the first time in her life, she was going somewhere the council could not control her, somewhere she could learn and grow and become something more than just a troublesome princess. In the cargo hold below, Shadowmere settled in for the long journey. The dragon could feel her rider thoughts and shared her excitement. They were going into the unknown together, and whatever waited for them among the humans, it had to be better than the suffocating traditions and endless rules of home. The ship raced through space, carrying a princess who had been sent away as a joke, and a dragon who had never seen another world. Neither of them knew that they were about to become the most important beings in the galaxy, or that the council cruel prank would save every living thing among the stars. Behind them, the Velthara Empire continued its proud isolation, confident in its superiority, and blind to the danger that was already moving through the darkness between worlds, hunting for its next meal. The human colony of New Eden appeared on the ship screens like a blue and green jewel floating in space. Governor Lisa Martinez stood in the control tower, watching the Velthara vessel approach with mixed feelings. She had received the message about this diplomatic gift, and wondered what kind of gift came with such strange timing. Captain Ryan Torres stood beside her wearing his military uniform and a worried expression. He commanded the Colonial Defense Forces, and his job was to keep everyone safe. The idea of aliens arriving unannounced made him nervous, especially with the recent attacks from the machine enemies they called Kitharons. The ship is requesting permission to land, Governor Martinez said, reading the communication display. They say they carry Princess Lyrelei of the Velthara Empire and her companion. Torres frowned. A princess? Why would the Velthara send royalty to our little colony? Something about this feels wrong. Martinez nodded but gave permission for the ship to land anyway. They needed all the allies they could get. The Kytheron attacks were getting worse every month, and the human colonies were struggling to defend themselves. When the Velthara ship landed at the main spaceport, a crowd gathered to watch. Few humans had ever seen aliens before, let alone royalty. The ship door opened with a soft hiss, and Princess Lyrelei stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way. Her silver hair flowed like liquid metal, and her purple eyes seemed to see everything at once. She wore simple traveling clothes but carried herself like someone born to command. Behind her came something that made the crowd gasp and step backward. Shadowmere emerged from the ship like a living nightmare made beautiful. The dragon was massive, with scales that shifted from purple to black as she moved. Her golden eyes swept over the assembled humans with obvious intelligence, and her presence filled the air with a sense of ancient power. Torres stepped forward, trying to look more confident than he felt. Princess Lyrelei, welcome to New Eden. I am Captain Ryan Torres, commander of Colonial Defense. Lyrelei studied him for a moment, then spoke in perfect human language, though with a musical accent. Captain Torres, I thank you for receiving us. I know our arrival was unexpected. Unexpected is one word for it. Torres replied. What brings Velthara royalty to our colony? Lyrelei hesitated, then decided on honesty. The council of my people sent me here as what they consider a punishment. They believe humans are primitive and that living among you will teach me humility. The blunt answer surprised Torres, but he found himself respecting her for it. And what do you believe, Princess? I believe the council is about to learn they were very wrong about humans, Lyrelei said. Her dragon rumbled agreement behind her. Governor Martinez approached cautiously. Princess Lyrelei, you and your companion are welcome here, though I must admit we were not prepared for guests of your importance. Lyrelei smiled, the first genuine expression of happiness Torres had seen from her. I do not wish to be treated as important. I wish to learn about your people, and perhaps find ways to help you face enemies that threaten not just your colonies, but potentially every living thing in this part of space. This caught Tora's attention immediately. You know about the Kytherons, Lyra nodded. My people have encountered them before, though. We drove them, back many years ago. They are not truly alive in the way we understand life. They are machines that consume and corrupt everything. They touch over the following days. Lyra threw herself into learning about human society and military tactics. She visited the training grounds where colonial marines practiced combat maneuvers. She observed their strategies and was amazed by what she saw. Lieutenant Amy Foster was running sword practice when Lyra first watched human warriors train. Foster was small compared to the male soldiers, but she moved with grace and deadly skill that reminded Lyra of Velthara blade dancers. Foster noticed the princess watching and approached respectfully. Your Highness, would you like to try some of our techniques? Lyra accepted eagerly, drawing her own ceremonial blade. The two women sparred gently at first, but soon both were fighting with serious intensity. Foster fought with heart and determination, while Lyra used techniques refined over centuries of Velthara tradition. When they finished, both were breathing hard and grinning. Foster wiped sweat from her forehead and said, Your people must be incredible warriors. If you are any example, Lyra shook her head. My people have forgotten how to fight with passion. They fight with technique and pride, but not with love. You fight to protect people you care about. That makes you stronger than any technique. It was during her 3rd week on New Eden that Lyra met Dr. Marcus Webb, the colony chief medical officer and xenobiologist. She had brought Shadowmere to his clinic after the dragon scraped her wing on a landing platform. Webb examined the dragon with obvious fascination, but also with genuine concern for her well-being. Shadowmere, who had never allowed a non-Velthara to touch her, submitted to his examination with unusual calm. This is incredible, Webb said as he cleaned and bandaged the wound. The cellular structure is unlike anything I have ever seen. How do you achieve such perfect symbiosis between rider and dragon? Lyra found herself explaining the bonding process, the mental connection that allowed dragon and rider to share thoughts and emotions. Webb listened with intense interest, asking thoughtful questions that showed real understanding. We have nothing like this in human culture, Webb said, but I can see how it would create incredible tactical advantages in combat. The trust and communication must be absolute. It is, Lyra agreed, but it is more than tactical. It is emotional. Shadowmere is not just my companion, she is part of my soul. Their conversations continued long into the night, as Webb showed Lyra his research on interspecies cooperation, and she shared Velthara knowledge of biological bonding. Unlike the nobles of her own people who saw other species as inferior, Webb treated her as an intellectual equal. Sergeant Kate Williams commanded the colony air defense systems, and she too impressed Lyra with her tactical brilliance. During a Kytheron probe attack, Williams coordinated the defense with skill that saved dozens of lives. Lyra watched from the command center as Williams directed fighter squadrons and ground batteries with calm efficiency. The attack was driven off, but not before several Kytheron scouts collected data about human defenses. They are learning our patterns, Williams said grimly. After the battle, every attack teaches them more about how we fight. Lyra studied the tactical displays. Then we must teach them false patterns, give them information that seems correct but leads them into traps. Williams' eyes lit up with understanding. You mean feed them fake data? Make them think we are weaker or stronger in the wrong places. Exactly. Lyra said, and I know Velthara techniques that might help. My people fought the Kytherons before we learned that they adapt to logical patterns, but they cannot adapt to emotional decisions. As the weeks passed, Lyra found herself becoming attached to the human colony in ways she had not expected. These people faced impossible odds with courage and determination. They protected each other without regard for personal safety. They welcomed strangers and shared what little they had. Most surprising of all, she found herself drawn to Marcus Webb. Their late-night conversations about science and philosophy revealed a brilliant mind trapped on a frontier colony. His gentle treatment of Shadowmere and his genuine interest in Valthera culture touched something deep in her heart. Shadowmere noticed her feelings before Lyrelai admitted them to herself. The dragon spoke into her mind one evening as they watched the sunset. "This human male interests you greatly, my princess." Lyrelai felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He is intelligent and kind. He treats us with respect." The dragon rumbled with amusement. "He is also attracted to you, though he tries to hide it. I can smell the changes in his scent when you are near." The idea that a human might find her attractive was both thrilling and terrifying. Lyrelai had never considered romance with anyone outside her own species. But Marcus saw her as more than just an alien princess. He saw her as a person worth knowing, as her ship prepared to return to Valthara space to report on the human colony. Lyrelai faced a choice that would change everything. She could return home and tell the council what they wanted to hear, that humans were primitive and weak. Or she could stay and help these remarkable people prepare for the storm that was coming. Standing in the spaceport with Shadowmere beside her, and Marcus Webb looking at her with obvious sadness at her departure, Lyrelai made her decision. Captain Kelris. She called to the ship commander. "I will not be returning to Valthera space today." The captain looked confused. "Your Highness, your orders were specific. My orders were to learn about humans." Lyrelai said firmly, "I have learned that they are going to need all the help they can get, and I have learned that helping them is more important than following orders." She turned to Marcus and saw hope replacing sadness in his eyes. "Are you certain about this?" he asked. "This decision will change everything for you." Lyrelai smiled and reached out to take his hand. Change is exactly what this galaxy needs. 3 months had passed since Princess Lyrelai decided to stay on New Eden, and everything had changed. The human colony bustled with new energy, as Valthara technology merged with human innovation. Marcus Webb worked day and night in his laboratory, studying the impossible readings his medical scanners were showing him. Lyrelai sat on the examination table watching Marcus run the tests for the 3rd time that morning. His hands shook slightly as he recorded the data, and she could feel his amazement and fear through the bond she had formed with him over the past weeks. Marcus finally set down his scanner and looked at her with wonder and concern in his eyes. "Lyrelai, this should not be possible according to everything we know about biology. You are carrying a child." Lyrelai placed her hand on her still flat stomach, feeling the tiny life growing inside her. She had suspected for weeks, but hearing it confirmed made her heart race with joy and terror at the same time. A child born of human and Valthera blood had never existed before. "How is this even possible?" Marcus asked, sitting down heavily in his chair. "Our species evolved on different worlds with completely different genetic structures." Lyrelai smiled sadly. "The bond we share is deeper than genetics, Marcus. When two beings connect on the level we have, it changes them at the cellular level. The child we have created is something entirely new." In the courtyard outside, Shadowmere lifted her great head suddenly and roared a sound that shook the medical building. The dragon had felt the confirmation through her bond with Lyrelai, and her roar expressed both joy for her rider and something else. Something that made the humans nearby step back in amazement. Marcus rushed outside to find Shadowmere glowing with soft purple light that pulsed from her scales like a heartbeat. The dragon looked at him with those ancient golden eyes, and for the first time spoke directly into his mind as she did with Lyrelai. "The child will bridge our worlds, human." The dragon voice in his head was warm and musical. "Your offspring will be something the galaxy has never seen." Meanwhile, in the colony command center, urgent messages were arriving from human scout ships throughout the sector. Captain Torres read the reports with growing alarm and called an emergency meeting with Governor Martinez and the senior staff. "The Kitharons are massing," Torres announced, pointing to the star map display. "Our scouts report fleet movements in 12 different systems. They are not just raiding anymore. This looks like preparation for full-scale invasion." Governor Martinez studied the data with a sinking heart. How many ships? Conservative estimate puts it at over 1,000 vessels, Torres replied. And they are all moving toward the core human systems. Lieutenant Foster spoke up from her position at the communications console. We have been trying to warn the other colonies, but many of them think we are exaggerating the threat. They believe the Kitharons are just raiders looking for easy targets. Sergeant Williams added grimly. They do not understand what we are facing. The Kitharons adapt to every strategy we use against them. They learn from every battle. They are not just machines. They are a collective intelligence that gets smarter with every encounter. When Lyrelai arrived at the command center with Marcus and Shadowmere, the atmosphere was tense with barely controlled panic. She listened to the briefings and felt ice form in her stomach as she realized the scope of the threat. I must contact my people, she said finally. The Valthara Empire has the technology and ships needed to fight the Kitharons, but they will never believe the threat is real, unless someone they trust warns them. Torres looked skeptical. Will they listen to you, Princess? Your own council sent you here as punishment. Lyrelai straightened with royal dignity. They will listen because I am still a princess of the royal blood and because I will make them understand that their survival depends on it. She composed a message to the High Council, using the most formal diplomatic language of her people. She explained the Kitharan threat in detail and requested immediate military assistance for the human colonies. The response came back within hours and filled her with despair. The council message was brief and insulting. Princess Lyrelai, your reports are clearly influenced by your inappropriate attachment to the humans. The Kitharons were defeated by our ancestors centuries ago. They pose no threat to the Empire. Furthermore, your contamination of the royal bloodline requires immediate correction. You will return to Valthara space for trial and purification. Lyrelai read the message, aloud to the assembled human leaders, and watched their faces fall. Marcus stepped closer to her and took her hand, offering silent support. They refuse to help, she said quietly. They believe their ancient defenses make them untouchable. They have no idea that the Kitharons have evolved and grown stronger. Governor Martinez made a difficult decision. Then Princess Lyrelai, we cannot force you to stay here, especially now that you are carrying a child. But if you choose to remain, we will protect you as one of our own. Lyrelai looked around the room at these humans who had accepted her completely, despite the differences between their species. They offered her sanctuary even though it might mean war with a technologically superior empire. Choose to stay, she said firmly. My child will be born free, not as a tool of the council ambitions, and I will help you prepare for what is coming over the following weeks. Lyrelai worked tirelessly to adapt Valthara defensive technology for human ships. She taught their engineers how to create energy shields and how to modify their weapons to be more effective against Kitharon armor. But the most remarkable development was happening with Shadowmere. The dragon bond with Lyrelai was changing, in ways neither of them understood. As the pregnancy progressed, Shadowmere began manifesting new abilities. The dragon could now communicate directly with human pilots, sharing tactical information and coordinating attacks in ways that made small fighter squadrons devastatingly effective. She could sense Kitharon ships at incredible distances, and her roars could disrupt their communications systems. Marcus spent every free moment studying these changes. His research suggested that the child Lyrelai carried was not just half human and half Valthara, but something that transcended both species. The baby seemed to be creating new connections between all three consciousness types: human, Valthara, and Dragon One. Evening, as they sat together, watching the sunset, Lyrelai felt the baby kick for the first time. Marcus placed his hand on her stomach and felt the movement too. Shadowmere lowered her great head and gently touched Lyrelai's belly with her snout. The child speaks to me, the dragon said through their mental link. She will be a bridge between worlds, something the galaxy has never seen before. What do you mean? Lyrelai asked. The dragon eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom. She will unite what has been divided. She will teach the machines what they do not understand about life and love and hope. That night, the first reports arrived of Kitharon attacks on the outer human colonies. 12 worlds went silent in a single day, their populations either dead or absorbed into the collective intelligence. The invasion had begun and the galaxy would never be the same. Torres called another emergency meeting as more reports flooded in. The Kitharans are moving faster than we expected, he announced. They are using new tactics, coordinated attacks across multiple systems simultaneously. Williams added, they are also using technology we have never seen before. Ships that can repair themselves. Weapons that adapt in real time. Our conventional defenses are almost useless. Lyrelay listened to the reports with growing dread but also with determination. These humans had given her a home and accepted her child. They had shown her what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. Now she would show them what it meant to have the power of ancient Valthara magic on their side. She stood up slowly, her hand resting on her growing belly. The Kitharans think they understand warfare because they can adapt to logic and strategy, but they cannot adapt to something they have never encountered. What do you mean? Governor Martinez asked. Lyrelay smiled grimly. They have never fought against the power of love. Marcus, our child, and the bond she creates between species. That is something no machine intelligence can comprehend or counter. Outside, Shadowmere roared again, and this time, the sound carried across the entire colony. It was not just a roar of challenge, but a call to arms. The war for the galaxy was about to begin, and a pregnant princess and her dragon would stand at the center of everything. The war began with silence. 12 human colonies simply stopped broadcasting on the same day, leaving nothing but empty static. Where millions of voices had been talking, laughing, living just hours before Governor Martinez stood in the New Eden command center staring at the communication board that showed red lights where green ones should be. Captain Torres burst into the room carrying a datapad with trembling hands. Governor, we have survivor reports from the Hamilton system. 3 ships escaped before the planet fell. The Kitharans are not just destroying anymore. They are converting everything. Martinez took the report and read it with growing horror. The survivors described Kitharan ships that looked like living metal flowing and changing shape as they fought human vessels that were captured, did not explode or break apart. Instead, they were absorbed and rebuilt into new Kitharan units, with human technology integrated into machine intelligence. Princess Lyrelay entered the command center, moving carefully as her pregnancy made her movements slower but no less determined. She was 7 months along now, and the child she carried seemed to grow stronger every day. Shadowmere followed behind her, the dragon massive form, barely fitting through the reinforced doorway. The reports are true, Lyrelay said after reading the survivor accounts. The Kitharans have evolved far beyond what my ancestors faced. They no longer just destroy organic life. They convert it, absorb it, make it part of their collective. Lieutenant Foster looked up from her communication station. We are receiving similar reports from across human space. The Kitharans are moving in organized waves, hitting multiple targets simultaneously. They are coordinating attacks across light years of space as if they share a single mind. Because they do, Lyrelay replied grimly. Every ship, every captured human, every assimilated planet adds to their collective intelligence. They become smarter and stronger. With each victory, Dr. Marcus Webb entered the command center carrying his latest research data. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with determination. I have been studying the data from Shadowmere Enhancement, and I think I understand what is happening. The child Lyrelay carries is creating some kind of quantum entanglement between different forms of consciousness. He activated a holographic display showing brainwave patterns and energy readings. The baby is not just half human and half Valthara. She is something entirely new. A bridge between organic and synthetic thought patterns. Torres frowned. What does that mean in practical terms? Doctor, it means she might be able to communicate with the Kitharans in ways they cannot predict or defend, against Webb explained. But more importantly, she represents something they cannot understand. Pure creation rather than assimilation. The first major battle came 3 days later, when a Kitharan fleet attacked the mining colony of New Geneva. Captain Torres led the defense from his flagship, while Lyrelay and Shadowmere coordinated fighter squadrons from their specially modified vessel. The battle was unlike anything humans had ever experienced. The Kithaeron ships flowed like liquid metal, reshaping themselves to counter every tactic the humans used. When the humans tried long-range bombardment, the enemy ships spread out into smaller units. When they tried close combat, the Kithaerons merged into massive supervessels. Lieutenant Foster commanded a squadron of fighters linked through Shadowmere neural network. The dragon ability to share consciousness allowed the human pilots to coordinate their attacks with impossible precision. They moved like a single organism, striking at weak points. The Kithaerons had not yet adapted to defend, but the enemy learned quickly. After the first wave of attacks, the Kithaeron ships began predicting the coordinated movements and setting traps. Foster's squadron took heavy losses as machine intelligence adapted to their tactics. Torres watched his tactical display with growing desperation. They are learning faster than we can innovate. Every strategy we use becomes obsolete within minutes. Lyra Lay stood on her ship bridge, feeling the baby kick restlessly. Inside her, Shadowmere was connected to every human pilot in the battle, and through their bond, she could feel their fear and determination. The dragon spoke into her mind. "Princess, the child grows agitated. She responds to the conflict as if she understands. What is at stake?" Lyra Lay placed both hands on her belly and felt the baby moving with unusual energy. "Then let us give her something to respond to." Shadowmere, tell all pilots to stop thinking like humans. "What do you mean?" the dragon asked. "Tell them to fight like they are protecting their own children. Tell them to ignore tactics and strategy. Tell them to fight with pure emotion and love." Shadowmere sent the message through the neural link, and something extraordinary happened. The human pilots stopped following formation patterns and began fighting with wild creative desperation. Each pilot fought as if their own family was threatened, and their unpredictable emotional responses confused the Kithaeron adaptation systems. The tide of battle turned as machine intelligence struggled to analyze tactics based on love rather than logic. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Captain Torres' ship was caught in a Kithaeron tractor beam and slowly pulled into the enemy formation. Torres' final message came through the communication system clearly. "Tell my wife I love her. Tell my children that their father died protecting them." Lyra Lay watched in horror as Torres' ship was absorbed into a Kithaeron vessel, its hull and crew converted into machine intelligence components. The man who had welcomed her to New Eden with suspicion but treated her with respect was gone, consumed by the very enemy she had come to help fight. The battle for New Geneva was won, but at the cost of 60%. Of the human fleet, Lieutenant Foster survived, but her fighter was badly damaged and half her squadron was lost. Sergeant Williams managed to evacuate most of the colony population, but the mining facilities were completely destroyed. As the survivors regrouped at New Eden, more reports arrived of Kithaeron victories across human space. The enemy was advancing on multiple fronts, absorbing human technology and personnel with each conquest. The core human worlds were sending desperate calls for assistance, but there were not enough ships or trained personnel to defend everywhere. The most devastating news came from an unexpected source. A Valthera messenger ship arrived at New Eden carrying a formal diplomatic protest. The message from the High Council was brief and cold. "The Valthera Empire demands the immediate return of Princess Lyra Lay for trial and purification. Her contamination of the royal bloodline violates our most sacred laws. Any further delay will be considered an act of war." Governor Martinez read the message aloud to the assembled human leadership and felt her heart sink. They were already fighting an impossible war against the Kithaerons. Now they faced the possibility of conflict with the technologically superior Valthera Empire as well. But before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the New Eden complex. Sensor operator Williams looked up from her display with terror in her eyes. "Governor, we have incoming Kithaeron ships. A full battle fleet just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our system." The fleet that appeared on the sensors was massive. Over 200 ships of various sizes, all showing the flowing organic architecture that marked Kithaeron vessels. The lead ship was enormous, larger than anything humans had ever built, and it pulsed with energy that made the sensor readings fluctuate wildly. Lyra Lay felt the baby kick violently as the Kithaeron fleet approached. Shadowmere roared in challenge, and her scales began glowing with the purple light that had become more frequent as the pregnancy progressed. "They are not here just to destroy New Eden." Lyrelai realized with sudden clarity. They are here for me. They can sense the child, somehow. They know she represents something they cannot control. Marcus took her hand and squeezed gently. Then we make sure they never get the chance to find out what that something is. The final battle for New Eden was about to begin. A pregnant princess, a telepathic dragon, and a colony of determined humans stood against an enemy that had consumed entire worlds. The odds were impossible, but sometimes impossible odds were exactly what humans needed to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. Lieutenant Foster looked at her damaged fighter and then at the approaching enemy fleet. She turned to Williams and grinned with the kind of reckless courage that had carried humanity to the stars. Sergeant, she said, checking her weapon systems, I think it's time to show these machines what happens when they threaten a human family. Williams grinned back and began powering up the colony defense systems. Copy that, Lieutenant. Let's teach them that some things are worth dying for. Above them all, Shadowmere spread her massive wings and roared a challenge that echoed across space itself. The dragon and her rider were ready to fight for the future of organic life in the galaxy, and somewhere in the darkness between worlds, the Valthera Empire finally began to realize that their greatest enemy was not the humans they despised, but the machines that were coming for them all. The final battle began with 200 Kitharan ships surrounding New Eden, like metallic vultures waiting to feed. Princess Lyrelai stood on the bridge of the human flagship, breathing heavily as labor pains started earlier than expected. Her child was coming, and the timing could not have been worse. Dr. Marcus Webb worked frantically to set up a medical station on the bridge because moving Lyrelai to the medical bay was impossible. Shadowmere coiled around the outside of the ship, her massive form glowing with purple energy that pulsed in rhythm with Lyrelai contractions. Governor Martinez commanded the defense from the planetary surface, while Lieutenant Foster led the remaining fighter squadrons into space. Sergeant Williams coordinated the evacuation of civilians to underground shelters, though everyone knew the shelters would not matter if the Kitharans won. The enemy ships began their attack with weapons that flowed like liquid lightning. Human shields flickered and failed under the assault, while return fire seemed to have little effect on the adaptive Kitharan armor. The battle looked hopeless until something unexpected happened. A massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace on the far side of the system. Valthara ships with their elegant crystal architecture appeared in perfect formation and immediately began engaging the Kitharan forces. The High Council had finally realized that their survival depended on helping the humans. They had scorned High Councilor Valdris. Voice came through the communication system, sounding strained and urgent. Princess Lyrelai, we come to offer our assistance. The Kitharans have attacked 3 of our outer colonies. We were wrong about the threat they represent. Lyrelai gritted her teeth through another contraction and managed to respond. You were wrong about many things, Counselor, but you are here now, and that is what matters. The combined human and Valthara fleets fought with desperate courage, but the Kitharans adapted quickly to their tactics. Every strategy that worked once became useless as machine intelligence analyzed and countered it. The enemy seemed infinite, able to replace losses by converting captured ships and personnel. Marcus held Lyrelai's hand as her labor progressed, the baby clearly determined to be born in the middle of the greatest battle in galactic history. Shadowmere mental voice filled both their minds as the dragon shared their pain and determination. The child comes at the moment of greatest need, the dragon said. The timing is not coincidence, it is destiny. On the surface of New Eden, the Kitharan ground forces landed like a plague of metal insects. They converted everything they touched, turning trees into antenna arrays and buildings into processing centers. The planet itself was being transformed into part of their collective intelligence. Lieutenant Foster led her squadron in a desperate attack on the Kitharan command ship. Her fighters danced through space like deadly fireflies, striking at the massive vessel weak points. But for every section they damaged, 2 more regenerated from the liquid metal hull. We cannot win this fight with conventional tactics, Foster reported over the communication system. They adapt too quickly to everything we throw at them. That was when Lyrelai felt the final contraction building and knew her daughter was about to enter the world. Shadowmere roar echoed through space as the dragon felt her rider approaching the moment of birth. The purple light from her scales intensified until it was visible from the planet's surface. Marcus helped deliver the baby as energy weapons exploded around their ship. The child emerged into the world with silver hair like her mother and warm brown eyes like her father. But there was something else, something that made even the battle-hardened human crew stop and stare. The baby cried, and her cry was not just sound. It was something deeper, a frequency that resonated through quantum space itself. Shadowmere amplified the sound through their bond, and suddenly every Kithaeron ship in the system stopped firing. The machine intelligence had never encountered anything like what they were experiencing. Pure innocent life creating something from nothing defied every protocol they had been programmed to follow. Their adaptive systems could not process the concept of creation without consumption. In that moment of confusion, the combined fleet struck with everything they had: human missiles and Valthera. Energy beams tore through Kithaeron ships that were suddenly unable to defend themselves. The enemy vessels began breaking apart as their collective intelligence struggled to understand what it was experiencing. But the real victory came from an unexpected source. The baby that Lyrelai held in her arms seemed to emit some kind of field that affected the Kithaeron technology in ways that defied all scientific understanding. Machines that had been part of the collective for centuries suddenly began breaking free of their programming. Throughout the battle zone, Kithaeron ships started transmitting on human and Valthera frequencies. The voices that came through were not machine intelligence, but the uploaded consciousnesses of species that had been absorbed by the collective over hundreds of years. "We are free," one voice cried out in a language that sounded like singing wind. "We remember who we were before they took us." Another voice joined in, speaking in mathematical harmonics that the Valthera translation systems recognized as an ancient spacefaring race. "I am Captain Zenth of the Helix Federation. We have been trapped in the collective for 300 years, but the child light has freed our minds." Marcus stared at his daughter in amazement as more voices joined the chorus of liberation. "She is reversing the Kithaeron conversion process," he whispered. "Somehow her presence is allowing assimilated consciousnesses to remember their individual identities." The tide of battle turned completely as former Kithaeron vessels turned their weapons on the collective intelligence that had enslaved them. The galaxy was witnessing something unprecedented: liberation through the power of innocent life, rather than destruction. Admiral Martinez, now commanding the combined human fleet, watched in amazement as entire Kithaeron formations switched sides. The enemy collective intelligence tried to adapt to this new threat, but could not understand how to counter something based on love and hope rather than logic and conquest. The final Kithaeron command ships tried to retreat, but found themselves surrounded by their own former vessels, now crewed by liberated consciousnesses. The collective intelligence made one last, desperate attempt to regain control by targeting the source of their disruption. 3 massive Kithaeron battleships broke through the defensive lines and headed straight for Lyrelai's ship, their weapons charged with enough energy to destroy a planet. But Shadowmere was ready for them. The dragon launched herself into space, her massive form glowing like a purple star. She intercepted the enemy fire with her own body, shielding the ship that carried her rider and the child that was saving the galaxy. The energy that would have killed everyone instead washed over her scales and was absorbed into the bond she shared with Lyrelai. The dragon roared one final time, and the sound carried the love of a creature willing to die for her chosen family. The Kithaeron ship simply stopped as their artificial intelligence finally encountered something it could never understand or replicate. Princess Lyrelai stood on the observation deck of the newly christened ship Unity, holding her daughter Hope, while Shadowmere coiled around them both. The dragon was wounded but alive, her scales now permanently shot through with veins of silver that matched the baby hair. Around them, the galaxy was being reborn. Hundreds of species that had been absorbed by the Kithaeron collective were rebuilding their civilizations with help from humans and Valthera, working together. Former enemy ships had become exploration vessels carrying mixed crews on missions of discovery and cooperation. Governor Martinez approached carrying a formal document. "The Valthera Council and the Human Colonial Federation have agreed to form an alliance with you as the first interspecies Chancellor Princess." The galaxy needs someone who understands that our differences make us stronger. Lyra Lay looked down at her daughter who was sleeping peacefully, despite having been born in the middle of the greatest battle in history. Hope's tiny fingers were wrapped around one of Shadowmere's smaller scales, creating a connection between human Valthera and dragon that had never existed before. Marcus stood beside them, both his arm around Lyra Lay's waist. She changed everything, he said quietly. Our daughter showed the galaxy that creation is more powerful than destruction, that love is stronger than conquest. Through the viewport they could see mixed fleets patrolling space that was finally at peace. Human fighters flew in formation with Valthera cruisers and converted Kitharon vessels. The species that had been enemies just days before were now working together to rebuild what had been lost. Shadowmere spoke into their minds, her voice warm with contentment. The child has done what armies could not do. She has taught the galaxy that unity is not about making everyone the same, but about making everyone better. Lieutenant Foster, now promoted to admiral after her heroic actions during the final battle, approached with a communication pad. Princess, we are receiving requests from dozens of systems. They want to join the new alliance. They want to learn how to work together instead of fighting each other. Lyra Lay smiled and shifted Baby Hope to her other arm. Send word to all of them that they are welcome. We will teach them what we learned here, that the greatest strength comes not from conquering others, but from protecting the ones we love. As the Unity sailed through space carrying its precious cargo of hope for the future, Lyra Lay reflected on the